Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment only. Imagine one of Hollywood's most admired actors, known for his thoughtful outlook and Texas charm, stepping into the high-pressure world of daytime TV and being hit with one of the most loaded questions possible. What follows isn't just another celebrity interview. It's a precise, almost clinical demonstration of media manipulation, an exchange so sharp that it left one of America's most assertive interviewers stunned, revealing the underlying mechanics of political journalism in real time. This is the story of the day. Matthew McConaughey walked onto the set of The View, confronted Joy Behar's carefully designed trap, and delivered a response so controlled and so exact that it instantly became a masterclass in refusing to be boxed in by the media. Before we dig into this moment, it's important to understand what you're about to see. This isn't simply a celebrity sidestepping an uncomfortable topic. It isn't a routine talk show spat, exaggerated for clicks. What you're reading is a moment where the curtain briefly lifted on how political media in America actually operates when the tactics were exposed live on air, and when a Texas-born Oscar winner reminded a table of veteran journalists that not everyone in Hollywood follows their script. The exchange itself lasted only seconds. One question, one cutting reply, but its impact spread across social media for days. It sparked intense conversations about media tactics, political labeling, binary thinking, and whether celebrities should be expected to declare loyalty to simplistic categories on demand. What makes this moment stand out is the precision of Matthew's answer. He didn't hesitate. He didn't awkwardly dodge. He didn't react with irritation. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He identified the tactic being used, pointed it out plainly, and declined to play along, all within a single sentence. That sentence would be replayed and discussed by millions who are tired of gotcha questions and soundbite-driven interviews. It was verbal aikido at its finest, and Joy Behar never saw it coming. The day began as any other episode might. The set of The View glowed with its usual warm lighting. The studio audience settled in, excited to see Matthew McConaughey in person. The production team completed their routine checks. Camera set, audio confirmed, everything functioning with the efficiency honed over decades on air. Matthew was the headline guest, there to talk about his appearance at the U.S. Open Finals, his family with his wife Camila and their 3 children, and most notably, his Greenlights Grant Initiativa program aimed at helping schools across the country access billions in unused federal safety funds. It was supposed to be simple, upbeat morning TV, a likable actor promoting meaningful work, sharing wholesome stories about family, and spotlighting charitable efforts. The kind of segment publicists love and producers count on because it guarantees strong ratings without conflict. Matthew walked into the studio with his signature relaxed confidence on Texas ease that manages to be both modest and magnetic. He greeted the audience with an easy smile and wave. His presence radiated authenticity, the kind you can't manufacture. The crowd responded with warm, enthusiastic applause, happy to see an Oscar-winning actor and cultural figure just feet away. Here was Matthew McConaughey, star of Dallas Buyers Club, Interstellar, True Detective, The Lincoln Lawyer, and Manny Mori, a man who had stayed grounded and likable throughout a long Hollywood career. What could go wrong? The panel welcomed him warmly. Whoopi Goldberg offered her usual professional greeting, tinged with genuine appreciation. Sarah N. smiled brightly, clearly thrilled to meet someone she admired. Sunny Hosteen acknowledged him with interest, her posture open and attentive. Even Alyssa Farah Griffin, the newest host, seemed genuinely happy he was there. The atmosphere was upbeat, friendly, and collaborative. Everything aligned with what Matthew's team and the show's producers had planned. Friendly questions, mutual respect, an easy conversation, and a platform to talk about his work. No controversy. No tension. No surprise confrontations. But Joy Behar remained unusually quiet during the opening pleasantries. Anyone familiar with The View would recognize the expression she wore. It wasn't outright hostility. It wasn't clear antagonism, but it was something more deliberate, a kind of patient watchfulness, like a cat studying a bird and waiting for the exact moment to strike. She smiled when appropriate, nodded at the right times, and maintained the appearance of polite engagement. But underneath, anyone who knew Joy's patterns could sense something entirely different. She was preparing, lining up her shot, choosing her moment, waiting until Matthew relaxed enough to think he was on safe ground. Those familiar with Joy's approach understood what was forming beneath that calm demeanor. Even if Matthew didn't fully realize the trap being laid around him, it was taking shape with every minute of seemingly harmless conversation. The opening portion of the interview unfolded as filled with practiced warmth. They discussed the U.S. Open, where Matthew had been seen sitting in Novak Djokovic's player box. During the championship match, he shared the story of Djokovic sprinting over to hug him after the win, a moment caught by cameras and shared widely online. Matthew explained, with genuine amusement, how his wife Camila had long been friends with Djokovic, how the connection grew through years of dinners and conversations. "What a surgeon and a warrior," Matthew said of Djokovic. "His admiration sincere. The resilience of what he's done is amazing. I was happy to be in his box. Got to sit behind his parents, which was really awesome to see them when he brings them up." His Texas drawl made every word feel real, almost intimate, as if he were chatting with friends rather than performing on air. The audience responded warmly, laughing and reacting at all the right moments. The other panelists followed along enthusiastically, asking light-hearted questions that kept the conversation moving. It was ideal morning television. A beloved actor sharing on us, humanizing stories, connecting with a sports icon, and giving viewers a moment of feel-good simplicity. The conversation drifted into family life, and Matthew's demeanor softened even more. When asked about his 3 children, 15-year-old Levi, 13-year-old Vida, and the 10-year-old Livingston, he let out the warm laugh audiences had loved for decades. "That's probably a loaded question," he joked. "I'm a good dad." We got 20 minutes for this answer. The audience laughed with him, sensing authenticity rather than canned celebrity parent clichés. And he did open up, speaking with sincerity. "Being a dad was the only thing I ever knew I wanted to be," he said, emotion in his voice. He recalled shaking hands with his father's friends as a child, commanding men he instinctively addressed as "yes, sir," and how he noticed they were all fathers. "That's my aspiration," he said. "That's when you become a sir, as a man." The studio grew quiet, taking in the honest, thoughtful moment. Matthew went on to talk about how personality traits appear in children from the start, how his kids' quirks as toddlers still reflect who they are today. It was heartfelt television, the kind that reminds viewers that celebrities are people, too, navigating the universal joys and challenges of raising a family. The panel reacted warmly, visibly moved by his honesty and devotion. Then the subject turned to something heavier, though still within safe territory: the Uvalde school shooting. The tragedy had deeply affected Matthew's hometown, prompting his passionate public advocacy. They discussed his emotional appearance at the White House, where he spoke about the murdered children, including the green Converse sneakers worn by one young victim. Joy, still mostly quiet until now, finally entered the conversation. "I want to applaud you for being so outspoken against violence and gun violence in particular," she said with what sounded like sincere appreciation. "You're a Texan, and you spoke so passionately at the White House last year after that shooting in your hometown." All the panelists wore small green pin symbols of the cause Matthew had championed. The image of his wife holding up those green sneakers had become iconic. Matthew nodded solemnly before the discussion shifted to his Green Lights Grant initiative, the practical program he created to address unused school safety funds. "Please tell us about it," Joy prompted, appearing genuinely interested, at least for the moment. Matthew explained the initiative with clarity and conviction. After Robb Elementary and other school shootings, the first bipartisan school safety bill in 30 years had passed, allocating billions for safer campuses. But months later, he discovered that very few districts were applying for the funds, and of those who did, even fewer were being approved. The money was still sitting untouched. He leaned forward, emphasizing the issue. Many district staff responsible for completing the complex 50-page federal grant applications were already overwhelmed, often doubling as bus drivers or pay teachers. "It's intimidating," he said. "I don't know about y'all, but I can barely get through a customs form without scratching things out. The audience laughed, recognizing the everyday frustration. But Matthew's point was serious. They don't have the expertise or the time. The government wants these grants submitted. They want the money spent. It's use it or lose it funding. And if it isn't used by 2026, it can be real. This was concrete, meaningful work, identifying a specific problem and creating an operational solution. It wasn't just speeches or awareness campaigns. It was real infrastructure aimed at helping small school districts access money that could actually save lives. The panel listened closely, several hosts nodding, clearly appreciating that this was genuine, hands-on advocacy rather than symbolic activism. The conversation seemed ready to wrap up. Matthew had outlined the initiative clearly, offered viewers practical steps, and demonstrated thoughtful, non-partisan commitment to school safety. It was the ideal ending. Informative, uplifting, and focused on solutions. But Joy Behar had been waiting for precisely this moment. When Matthew was comfortable, open, and framed as a sincere advocate for children's safety, this was when she moved. In 2021, Joy began, her voice shifting just slightly into a tone longtime viewers would recognize as the lead-in to a loaded question. You considered a run for governor of Texas, right? Matthew nodded cautiously, sensing a shift, but not yet seeing the full trap. Joy pressed on. So, do you think political office is in your future? Can you see that? On its surface, it was a fair question. He had publicly considered a run. His advocacy work was high-profile. Matthew answered with balance, keeping space open without over. If it's where I would deem myself to be most useful, yeah. The audience murmured approvingly. It was thoughtful, measured, sincere. But Joy wasn't asking because she was curious. She was setting the ambush. She leaned forward, the faintest predatory smile at the edges of her expression, eyes bright with anticipation. This was the moment she had engineered. The question finally came, designed to corner him no matter how he answered. Do you think you could get elected in Texas being anti? The temperature in the room dropped. Te hirtaiten. It wasn't just a pointed question, it was a weaponized one, a verbal explosive rigged to detonate no matter where Matthew stepped. If it's a he. Yes. He looked naive. If aside no, he'd be forced into defending positions he didn't hold or admitting he'd compromise his values to win. Either answer created a soundbite that could follow him indefinitely. And beneath it all was the deeper trap. Accepting the label anti-gun by answering directly. He would be implicitly accepting someone else's framing, reducing his views to a simplistic binary that erased nuance, complexity, and the actual substance of his advocacy. The other hosts sensed it instantly. Their posture stiffened. A few shifted uneasily. This wasn't a sincere question. It was a setup designed to produce a viral clip. The audience went quiet. The lighthearted atmosphere was gone. Producers in the control room were likely frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing television gold or the beginning of a PR emergency. Matthew recognized the shift. His expression changed subtly, but unmistakably. The warmth drained from his eyes, replaced with sharp focus. His relaxed demeanor tightened into alert readiness, like someone who realizes the sparring match has become a real fight. But McConaughey didn't survive Hollywood by being naive. He wasn't about to walk straight into an obvious trap. Do I think I could get elected in Texas being anti-gun? He repeated slowly. His drawl deepened, each word measured. He locked eyes with Joy, thinking not just about the question, but the tactic behind it, the architecture of the trap. He paused. The moment stretched. Everyone leaned in. Then he delivered the response that would be replayed and analyzed for weeks. One thing about me in politics, he said, his voice firm and deliberate, is to give you a direct statement right there is playing a game that I'm not interested in playing. He pointed directly at Joy for emphasis. The words were sharp, precise, and devastating. The studio fell completely silent, not the expectant silence from moments earlier, but a stunned, breathless stillness. This was something entirely different. It was the stunned silence of people realizing they had just witnessed something they didn't expect, something that shifted the entire dynamic in the room. Matthew continued, firmly reinforcing his point and making sure everyone understood exactly what he meant. Giving you a direct statement right there. Repeated, still pointing at Joy and never breaking eye contact. He's playing a game I'm not interested in playing. Boom. Done. A verbal knockout delivered with such precision that Joy Behar, a woman known for her sharp tongue, quick comebacks, and years of sparring with high-profile guests, was left speechless. The host, who was rarely, if ever, at a loss for words, suddenly had none. Matthew hadn't simply dodged the question. That would have been predictable. Instead, he did something far more cutting. He exposed the trap itself. Named the Italiano? He showed the audience exactly what Joy was attempting to do, and refused to engage. It was verbal aikido, using the momentum of the attack to neutralize it, redirecting the energy instead of absorbing it. And he did it effortlessly. Across Joy's face, emotions flickered one after another: surprise at being confronted so directly, confusion about how to respond, a momentary flash of reluctant respect, and finally settling into uncertainty. For a host who usually commanded every exchange, this was unfamiliar territory. For the first time in ages, Joy Behar had no comeback. The carefully laid trap crumbled before she could fully spring it, exposed as manipulation instead of genuine curiosity, and the cameras caught every second. The other hosts exchanged quick looks, their raised eyebrows showing a mix of shock and admiration. Whoopi recognized great television when she saw it. Sarah looked genuinely impressed, maybe even relieved that Matthew had navigated the moment without blowing up the segment. Even Sunny, who often pushed guests hard, seemed to respect the precision of Matthew's move. The audience felt the shift instantly. Some nodded in strong agreement. Others sat processing what had just happened. But everyone knew they'd just seen something unusual. This wasn't standard celebrity dodging. This was a direct, calm calling out of a media tactic as it unfolded. Matthew's response landed with power because of its simplicity. He didn't insult Joy. He didn't get defensive, emotional, or flustered. He didn't launch into a long explanation of his beliefs or try to argue within the narrow confines of the question. He didn't accept the binary framing. Instead, he did the smartest thing possible. He called the game what it was and refused to play. That clarity made the moment unforgettable. In under 10 seconds, Matthew McConaughey did what so many public figures failed to do. He kept control of his own narrative, exposed a manipulative setup, and did it in a way no one could twist into an attack. It was a masterclass in media strategy, a perfect demonstration of how to stay authentic in an environment designed to corner you. Joy attempted to move on, but the moment had already been claimed. Any follow-up would only make her look worse, proving his point that she'd been trying to box him into a headline, and Matthew had shut the door on that completely. His refusal to participate said more about his character and intelligence than any direct answer ever could. He showed he valued nuance over sound bites, substance over spectacle, genuine conversation over political theater. For viewers exhausted by gotcha questions and aggressive framing from all political perspectives, his response felt like fresh air. The interview continued, but the energy was different. Matthew answered other questions smoothly, talking about his initiative, upcoming projects, and his approach to work and family. The audience applauded as usual. But underneath it all, everyone knew the moment that mattered had already happened. He entered the studio as a charismatic actor, promoting a project. He walked off as something more. Someone unwilling to be defined on someone else's terms. Someone who could spot manipulation instantly and shut it down without hostility. Someone who demonstrated that you don't have to play the game just because someone tries to force you into it. Joy maintained her professional composure, moving to the next topic as if nothing had happened. But everyone who'd watched knew exactly what had occurred. The trap had been exposed. The hunter had become the hunted. And Matthew McConaughey walked away with his integrity intact while the person who set the trap was left standing in the middle of it. What began as a standard Morning show interview turned into a viral cultural moment, shared millions of times across social media within hours. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, every platform erupted with clips, reactions, and debates about what exactly they had witnessed. Conservative commentators praised Matthew for refusing to walk into Joy Behar's obvious trap and for rejecting the attempt to box him in through partisan media framing. Liberal commentators, meanwhile, appreciated his practical, solution-focused approach to gun policy and his refusal to fall into simplistic, polarized thinking. Centrists pointed to him as proof that meaningful dialogue can still exist outside the toxic extremes that dominate much of American political conversation. Media analysts broke down the clip frame by frame, noting the strategic brilliance of his reply, and across the political spectrum, one reaction stood out above all others: respect. Even people who disagreed with his views on gun policy or wished he had offered a more explicit political stance found themselves admiring how skillfully he handled the moment. He stayed authentic, refused manipulation, and did so without hostility or condescension. That balance, being principled without preaching, firm without being rude, clear without being simple, deeply with millions of Americans fatigued by the repetitive patterns of political discourse. The moment captured a widespread but often unspoken frustration, exhaustion with gotcha questions, soundbite politics, and forced binary choices on issues far too complex for yes or no answers. Not everything is black and white. Not every question deserves a simplistic response, and not every trap must be stepped into merely because it's placed before you. Matthew understood this instinctively, and on national television, he demonstrated that understanding with a response that was both disarmingly simple and surprisingly sophisticated. 8 words shifted the entire energy of the conversation. "That is playing a game I'm not interested in playing." With that single line, he rejected the premise of the question, refused the anti-gun label, exposed the manipulation embedded within the framing, reclaimed control of his own narrative, and reminded viewers that public figures don't owe journalists. Soundbites crafted for viral moments. Was Joy Behar wrong to ask the question? It depends on perspective. Journalists are expected to ask tough questions, challenge public figures, and clarify positions so audiences can better understand them. Did Matthew sidestep a legitimate inquiry, or did he skillfully expose a manipulative framing? Reasonable people can disagree. Should celebrities who enter political discussions be pushed to take clear positions, or should they be allowed the same nuance and complexity afforded to everyday citizens? Again, the answer isn't simple, which is exactly the point Matthew was making. Gun policy, like most meaningful political issues, lives in a gray zone that defies neat categories. Real solutions require nuance, thoughtful trade-offs, and open engagement with complexity, not ideological rigidity or forced binaries. And that, perhaps, was Matthew McConaughey's deeper message, not spoken outright but demonstrated through action. By refusing to reduce complex beliefs into a single soundbite, he highlighted the flaws of the system that demands those soundbites in the first place. In that moment on The View, Matthew didn't just sidestep a trap, he revealed the machinery behind it, modeled a different way to respond to loaded questions, and reminded millions of Americans tired of the endless political games that sometimes the strongest move is simply refusing to play.